Welcome to the 8th South-South Forum on Sustainability. And today we are very honored to have with us very distinguished speakers. I think everybody knows Vandana SHIVA, and so we are very honored that we have having her with us today. So first, I will introduce the moderators for today. My name is Lau Kin Chi. I have been teaching in Lingnan University for 35 years, first in translation and then in cultural studies. I'm currently the coordinator of the program on cultures of sustainability in the Center for Cultural Research and Development of Lingnan University. I'm also director of the executive team of the Global University for Sustainability. And I've been involved in the rural reconstruction movement in China for over 2 decades. I'm also board member of Peace Women across the globe. And my co-moderator for today is FELICIEN. She is a Venezuelan agroecology researcher. She completed her undergraduate degree in environmental studies at the INYAKU University, followed by a master's degree in tropical ecology at the University of the Andes, focused on soil ecology and nutrient dynamics in agricultural soils. Later, she worked as a researcher with the Institute of Advanced Studies, focused on agroecology and food sovereignty. She is currently working at the Ecosystems and Global Change Laboratory of the Venezuelan Institute of Scientific Research and is a professor at the National Indigenous Experimental University. She was part of the team which worked with the nationwide bottom-up process for the collective construction of a new national seed law, which was approved in 2015. Currently, she is working at the national level with small farmers' experiences in participatory breeding of maize and potato, among other crops, focusing on the seed law implementation process. At the international level, she is member of the Working Group of Political Agroecology of CLACSO, the Latin American Council of Social Sciences, and the Working Group of the Agricultural Biodiversity of the Latin American section of International Planning Committee for Food Sovereignty. We will be having a discussant, Dr. Dr. Tomoya INYAKU. I'll introduce him later when he speaks. So I would like now to introduce Dr. Vandana SHIVA. So Dr. Vandana SHIVA was trained as a physicist. In 1982, she founded an independent institute, the Research Foundation for Science, Technology and Ecology in Dehradun, which is dedicated to high quality and independent research to address the most significant ecological and social issues of our times. In 1991, she founded NAVDANYA, a national movement to protect diversity and integrity of living resources, especially native seeds. NAVDANYA means 9 Cs, symbolizing protection of biological and cultural diversity, and also the new gift for seed as commons, based on the right to save and share seeds in today's context of biological and ecological destruction. The seed savers are the true givers of seed. Her journey on the road to ecological sustainability started with the Chipko movement in the 1970s, when women in the region of the Himalayas protected forests by hugging trees. Intellectual property rights, biodiversity, biotechnology, bioethics, and genetic engineering are among the fields where Dr. SHIVA has contributed intellectually and through activist campaigns. She has assisted grassroots organizations of the Green Movement in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Ireland, Switzerland, Austria, and many places with campaigns against genetic engineering. Dr. SHIVA has also served as an advisor to governments in India and abroad, as well as NGOs, including the International Forum on Globalization, the Women's Environment and Development Organization, the Third World Network, and the Asia Pacific People's Environment Network. She is a very prolific writer, having written more than 20 books. They include Oneness versus 1%, Staying Alive, The Violence of the Green Revolution, Biopiracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge, Monocultures of the Mind, Water Wars, Privatization, Pollution and Profit, and Stolen Harvest, The Hijacking of the Global Food Supply, as well as over 300 papers in leading scientific and technical journals. In 1993, she received the Right Livelihood Award, which is commonly known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. Other awards include the Order of the Golden Ark, Global 500 Award of the UN, Earth Day International Award, the Lennon Ono Grant for Peace, and the Sydney Peace Prize 2010. She's also one of the 1,000 peace women across the globe that was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by the organization Peace Women Across the Globe. So Vandana, it is our very, very great honor and immense pleasure to have you come to the again this year. If you remember, we had two young ladies ask you questions in July last year at the 7th Forum. They are Ona and Ella Ko. So Ella actually did the transcript of your lecture last year after she read many of your books to prepare for the questions. The young ladies are here tonight, thrilled that they could meet you again this year.
Special greeting to Ona and Ella, and a particular, I feel now you're my old friends. You know, we've been together for 2 sessions now. When I talk about seeds of hope, I really talk about you all as the seeds of hope. Yeah. Ola and Anna, you are seeds of hope. You are carrying forward the values, the knowledge that allows us to be alive, to be happy, and to be well. For me, seeds of hope are the real seeds that grow food, but they're also the future generations like you. Yeah. And when I talk about seeds of hope, you know, when people say, how are you hopeful in the middle of so much despair? It's because hope is cultivated. Hope is a potential you cultivate. It comes through care. So when you take care of that banana in the university and it gives you fruit, don't you feel hope, Ella? That this beautiful plant you cared for gave you hope. And it gave you banana. Yeah. So seeds of hope are really the cultivation of care of the earth and of each other. And when I talk about people's resilience, resistance, and regeneration in times of public health and climate catastrophe and disasters, all this comes forth. Because what is COVID? What are the 300 new infectious diseases that have come from forests and infected us? The HIV, the Zika, the Ebola, there's a monkey disease in India. When you invade into the forests, you destroy the homes of indigenous people, but you also destroy the homes of animals. And on those animals are large numbers of viruses, like we too are walking viruses. You know, you can't have a war against the virus because it would have to be a war against the human being. We have viromes and biomes. All over our skin, there's viruses that protect us. All over us, there are bacteria, beneficial bacteria. The idea that all viruses are damaging and pathogenic and all bacteria are pathogenic doesn't understand life. You know, when you showed me that beautiful banana, when we eat the banana has a beautiful conversation in our gut which is a microbiome of 100 trillion microbes. Just imagine the number. More people in each of your guts than on the planet. And you, Ola, Ella, you're only 90% human. The rest of you is microbes. And if they weren't there, they weren't healthy, and you weren't giving them good food, you'd be sick. So what is COVID? COVID is a symptom of a worldview without limits and an economy of greed that is destroying what we have to invade into forests and then destroy the real food to give us fake food. Yeah. Now, I know throughout Asia, we have had different oils. We've had sesame oil, we've had linseed oil, we've had coconut oil, we've had so many oils to cook. We are so rich in edible oils. But what are we being forced to eat today? What are the poor being forced to eat today? Two oils that both come from invasion into the forest. The Amazon is being burnt for a genetically engineered soya, which has been made resistant to Roundup. So they're spraying Roundup. And if you see the images of the soya plantations, 100 big machines are harvesting. 90% of this goes for animal feed and biofuel. 10% comes to us, and it's not healthy for us because sprayed with Roundup, it gives us cancer. You know, in 1998, I must tell you this story. In 1998, all our edible oils were banned. And all our virgin cold pressed Ghanis, oil makers, making machines, were banned. And the women from the slums of Delhi called me because from 91 onwards, I was fighting globalization. And I used to do these meetings, and we had women's food sovereignty movements. And I used to tell them about globalization and WTO and intellectual property and seed and all of this. And they said, you talk a lot about food, but they've taken our mustard away. I don't know if they eat mustard oil in China, but in North India, mustard oil is the favorite oil. Not the pungency, because the pungency is what has the antifungal properties, the antibacterial properties, anti-cancer properties. All of that is in our mustard oil. When I had my little baby, part of what we do is we massage the baby with mustard so the baby does not get any fungal diseases. Yeah. And when we were children, we used to put mustard oil and salt and clean our teeth, and everyone's teeth used to shine white. Now we have all these synthetic toothpaste, and everyone's got caries and everyone's got problems. But 98, the women called me and said, you've got to bring our mustard back because our children are not going to sleep eating food cooked in soya oil. I had no idea this had happened. So I did a quick research. I said, give me 1 week to do research. Why did they ban? How did they ban? What is soya? And what's the benefits of mustard? And what are our edible oils? So I did a quick book. And I realized then for the first time that, of course, soya originated in Asia. And it is the ultimate food of China, of Japan. And we have an old variety of soya in our Himalayan mountains called the bhat, the ancestral variety. But you eat tofu, you eat sauces. In Indonesia, they eat, what's the fermented soya called? The way they do it in Indonesia?
Tempeh.
Tempeh, right, yeah. So if you realize in the home of soya, they always ate it as a fermented food. Why did they eat it as a fermented food? Because soya by itself has anti-nutritive factors. And if you ferment it, then it goes out. Among these anti-nutritive factors are A, phytic acid, which removes minerals from the body. It's chelator. It takes away the minerals. So we get deficiencies. Another quality of it is a phytoestrogen. And the women were telling me, these are women who have never been to school. They're saying when we eat soya, we feel like we have taken 10 contraceptive pills. It's now being proven it's a phytoestrogen. It is responsible for endocrine disruption. It's the 10th highest in the list of endocrine disruption. So here we are, we have all these wonderful oils, and they're banned to dump GMO soya. The Americans subsidize it up to, I don't know, it was hundreds of dollars a ton. And then India was subsidizing it 1,500 rupees a ton. We were subsidizing it, making a costly oil cheap. And you can't take oil out of soya without a solvent extraction. So that's when I woke up to the harm that GMO soya is doing to our health. And of course, since then, I've been following the cases. I've appeared as witness to the cases on cancer in America. There are 125,000 cases of cancer. And I'm giving you this background because here we have soya was the native crop of Asia. It's destroyed in Asia. And we're growing it in the Amazon, we're growing it in the Midwest, we're chopping down. The other is we're chopping down the rainforests of Indonesia to grow palm oil. And then we dump that and destroy local agriculture. But we are not just destroying local agriculture, we are creating disease through chronic diseases, and we are creating pandemics. So that is where the story of greed and, of basically limitless profits comes in. Why do they go after soya? Because they have patents on soya. And they collect royalties. There was a very big case in Brazil where Monsanto wanted to charge royalties. And I think when we talk about this issue of seed, and Anna will come on board, we can have a little more discussion on the issue of seed, of intellectual property, etc., which is the reason I started NAVDANYA in 1987. But coming back to the catastrophes, here we have one catastrophe, which seems to be a health catastrophe, and we have another catastrophe called a climate catastrophe. But the two have the same root. Both are rooted in a worldview of separation, a worldview that nature is dead, a worldview that we are not part of nature, a worldview of greed, no limits, no ecological limits, no planetary limits, no species limits. And, I always used to define genetic engineering as breaking species boundaries. A bacteria is a bacteria. But you add that bacteria to a plant, you are violating the species boundary of that plant. And then you create a very weak plant, which then gets all kinds of diseases. Talk more about it. But most people don't connect COVID with climate change. And right now, what are we having? We have Germany flooding, like India and China and other countries have been flooding for a while. We have borne the cost of the pollution of the rich countries, their use of fossil fuels, and their use of fossil fuels helped them colonize bigger parts of the world. They couldn't have sailed so far without the fossil fuels. And then they couldn't have made the mechanized clothing and destroy the Indian cottons and the Chinese silk by dumping machine-made clothing, all run on fossil fuels. So for 200 years, they have been polluting. And climate change is nothing but a result of the pollution of the atmosphere by fossil fuels. But it is also a pollution of the atmosphere by a way we grow food. My book, Soil Not Oil, and so much of my research since then, has assessed that if you add all the changes in agriculture, since industrialization of agriculture, which is use of fossil fuels and chemical agriculture, and globalization of agriculture, which is intellectual property rights, agreement of agriculture, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, what you really have is 50% of the climate problem. is coming from the same sources that are giving us the infectious diseases escaping from the forest. And yet, if you look at how hell-bent the pseudoscientists have been trying to say it's all because of the wet markets of the Chinese. Yeah, I mean, they can cook up any story. They can say, they deny that methane is emitted because you feed animals soya bean. Animals are supposed to eat herbs. That's why they're called herbivores. And instead you feed them soya beans. And then they emit methane in the factory farms. And then Mr. Bill Gates, who's written a book called How to Avoid Climate Disaster, he says the problem is the cow. The cow has 4 stomachs. You know, we have cows, but you know, the research foundation I started in '82, my mother gifted me her cow shed. I grew up with cows. Our cow shed never stank. We never had meat, and it smelled so beautifully of lovely cow dung and lovely, you know, and one of my favorite playthings while I was a child was plastering with cow dung. It was like artwork, you know. Our huts used to be cow dung. We have an Earth University, a beach with your feet at NAVDANYA. And if you go to the website, and I have posted 2 links in the chat box. The first link is to reclaim the seed, and I'll talk more about that. And the second is about a course we organize every October on Return to Earth, the A to Z of ecological agriculture and agroecology. And on that, you'll find the website. And if you go to the website, you will then find out about the NAVDANYA farm. And the NAVDANYA farm, you know, I've never used fossil fuels. Never allowed tractors. We have lovely bullocks. And the walls, we've plastered them with cow dung and mud. And they're so cool in the summer, and they're so warm in the winter. Unlike cement. Cement is the opposite. Hot in the summer and cold in the winter. That's where our traditional knowledge comes into play. So the same model that gives us COVID and pandemics gives us climate disasters. And I said 50% of the climate disaster comes from industrial, globalized, fossil fuel-based, chemical-based agriculture. Let me share the figures with you. 11 to 15% is from production, both mechanized production of a very, very large scale. You know, when Albert Howard was sent to India in 1905, he said, I will make the Indian peasant my professor because this farming I cannot improve. And he wrote in that the Chinese and the Indian peasants have been farming on the same piece of land without degrading it for 10,000 years. That's the kind of farming we did. Albert Howard, Agricultural Testament, please read it. And then there's another by King called Farmers of 40 Centuries, which is focused much more on China. But when you have big machines and you're using nitrogen fertilizer, you're emitting 50%, 11 to 15% of the greenhouse gases, because nitrogen fertilizer emits nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide. But it also runs off, only 10% is used by the plant. It runs off into the oceans and the rivers and kills all life. That's why these zones are called dead zones. And if you look at the map of the dead zones, they're expanding every year. If you want to know why the coral reefs die, because of nitrogen fertilizer. So your atmosphere is being killed, your water is being killed, and your soil is being killed. And when, you know, how are these synthetic fertilizers made? They were made with the same method that made explosives for Hitler's Germany, by firing fossil fuels at hot temperature and fixing atmospheric nitrogen. It's called the Haber-Bosch process. And then you had raw material to make explosives, but the same raw material can make synthetic fertilizer, which is why you have so many fertilizer bombs. All over Afghanistan, fertilizer bombs. Oklahoma, the Beirut explosion of urea. Now, what they said is we'll grow bread from air. We don't need land anymore. We don't need soil anymore. Something they're saying again with all kinds of industrial agriculture. But a healthy soil in 1 gram, soil contains 30,000 protozoa, 50,000 algae, 400,000 fungi. And these 400,000 fungi in 1 cubic meter are so long that they could go around the diameter of the earth. And they bring nutrition. They move around and they create community. 1 teaspoon of living soil contains 1 billion bacteria, which translate into a ton per acre. 1 cubic meter, 1,000 earthworms, which amplify your nitrogen 5-fold. You don't need nitrogen fertilizer. 50,000 insects, 12 trillion roundworms. The soil is a living system. And when we put nitrogen fertilizer, we contribute to climate change, but we desertify the soil. We kill these organisms. Second, I mentioned how COVID and climate change comes from the same source. When we invade into forests, it's called land use change in the climate treaty, but it's about 15 to 20%. It's also giving us disease epidemics and displacing indigenous people. And then we take good food and make a mess of it. We process it and we transport it, and all my mind, India had no waste. Everything was recyclable. The wonderful bananas that Ona showed me, we used to serve in banana leaves, the food. And at the end of the meal, we'd give it to the cow. We had no waste. We didn't have styrofoam, we didn't have plastic. And then the World Bank told us we were backward and we must have plastic. 75% of all the pollution is plastic pollution. Most of it comes from packaged food. And that's why I say we have to have local economies to get rid of climate change and plastic pollution. Because if you can just go with your little cloth bag to the neighbor, and that's why they want to shut down the wet markets and the fresh food markets. So processing, transport, packaging, retail, Amazon now runs groceries. They began by destroying publishing houses. Now they want to destroy our small farms and our small retail. This is another 20%. And when you build global supply chains with uniformity, that creates waste. 50% of American food is wasted, beginning from the farm, where if the peach is slightly smaller, it's thrown away. If the cabbage is slightly smaller, it's thrown away. If the tomato is not exactly the same size. And you know how they measure safety of food? Not whether it has chemicals in it or not. They measure safety by measuring the size. And I say, this is the ultimate victory of the Cartesian thought. How have we landed in such a mess that we think we are feeding the world by creating pandemics and climate change, which are killing people? Where did we become so insane? This foundation was laid at the time of colonialism, but then, as now, people were picked up to articulate the idea that nature is dead. 9 million people were killed in Europe. 9 million people were killed in Europe, while they were also colonizing our lands as witches. What was being a witch? Being close to nature. If you thought of yourself as part of nature, you were a witch. If you healed yourself with herbs, you were a witch. If you were an expert in childbirth, you were a witch. 9 million Europeans, most of them women, were killed. Same time when they were coming to our lands to colonize, same time as they were taking the land away from the peasants in what is called the enclosures of the commons. So who are the two big names who are called the fathers of modern science? One is Bacon. And Bacon basically said, we have to tame nature. We have to not merely exert a gentle guidance on her course, but we have to conquer her and subdue her and shake her to her foundations. And because he was responsible as chancellor also of the witch hunts, he applied the same in methods of inquiry and integration, which was torture. He turned torture into a scientific method of inquiry. Whereas our indigenous systems are based on partnership and co-creation. The indigenous system of medicine in India is called Ayurveda. In China, now those people who can afford it in America are all using Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. Those who can afford it do not go to the allopathic treatment. They choose the alternatives that are alternative. But in our cultures, unscientific. And every second day, I have to defend my fellow Ayurvedic physicians against one. There's a lovely herb called giloy, which has seen people through the pandemic because it's very good at immunity building. They're attacking that because this gives people the ability to take care of themselves. And if there's one thing capitalist patriarchy cannot tolerate, it is your being able to take care of yourself. It cannot accept self-reliance, self-regeneration, and basically true sustainability. So Bacon actually even wrote a book called The Masculine Birth of Time. He said, still now, knowledge has been effeminate, and now I'll create a masculine birth of time and create heroes that can create dominion of man over nature. And if you think it's over, Google, you search on Google. Google has a new life sciences division. And we know women have iron deficiency when they don't eat enough iron. Well, you can just increase the iron in the diet. You can grow more herbs. What does Google want to do? Put nanoparticles of iron into our blood, untested, 10 to the power minus 9. And the founder of that division says, got to defeat Mother Nature. For them, Mother Nature is still the enemy. And they've been trying so hard. And then you have René Descartes. Same time as colonialism, For people who don't connect these things, the witch hunts, the enclosures, the Bacons, the Descartes, this is, Descartes says, I'm going to create a new machine of the mind. My mind is not a machine. And then he says this mechanical philosophy will basically redefine, and even human bodies will be defined as mindless accepting, and only superior beings like him. He says, I am a thinking thing without a body. So, Mr. Descartes, if you didn't have a body, you wouldn't be able to breathe. If you didn't have a body, you wouldn't be able to eat food and nourish your body. If you didn't have a body, you wouldn't be alive. But what they were doing is basically saying life does not exist. Our machines, which make profits for us, is all there is in the world. So when they found chemical fertilizers could be made by the same methods that created synthetic fertilizer, explosives, they came up with the idea that the soil is dead. The soil is inert matter. And the interesting thing is, Liebig, who was the ultimate scientist who worked on organic chemistry, he said, this is wrong. I talked about the recycling of nature. I didn't talk about external inputs. And he actually wrote a book called The Law of Recycling. It's been just translated. It's an 1887 book, but it's just been translated into English. And I was asked to do the foreword. And it's quite amazing what he's written. He says, I have to tear down the altar of falsehood, making money out of soil. So when we should be recycling, now China has had amazing recycling systems. India has had amazing recycling system. And this is what we call regenerative agriculture. This is what we call organic farming. This is what we call biodynamic permaculture. All systems are really about giving back to the earth, the law of return. And our work in NAVDANYA has shown that when you give back to the earth, you actually produce more food. Yeah, we've just done a poster, and I'll see if I can find it somewhere. I'm very slow in putting it up, but when maybe Anna and all are talking, I'll try and put it up. We've just done a new poster, and it's on our tweet, how industrial agriculture is destroying the world and causing climate change. And ecological biodiverse agriculture is not just rebuilding nature's ecological processes, but it is producing more food. If you feed the soil, you have 5 times more food. If you have biodiversity rather than monocultures, you can double the food production. And if you let the pollinators pollinate instead of killing them with pesticides, 1/3 more food. And this is where we feed the world, not by spraying poisons, not by extracting soil fertility. And then the same extractivist mind entered the seed. I happened to be at a meeting where I was invited because I'd written the book on the violence of the Green Revolution because of the way Punjab had been destroyed, a rich land with 5 rivers. And at this meeting in 1987, the chemical companies were saying, now we've got to make more money by owning the seed. And for that, we have to do genetic engineering. They never said in 87, we have to do genetic engineering to feed the world. That was rhetoric they picked up later. They said very honestly, we can't take a patent unless we do genetic engineering, because an ordinary seed farmers will say, this is something we've evolved. So they very, very, very clearly had patenting of seed and ownership of seed as the objective. So if you think of Bacon and Descartes, what are they defining? They're turning Mother Earth, terra madre, into terra nullius, the empty land. This is the jurisprudence that colonized Australia. This is the jurisprudence that colonized Americas. This is the jurisprudence that colonized Africa. We were considered not human. Yeah. If we were there, it was empty land because we weren't fully human. Only the Europeans were fully human. Only the whites and the European colonizer was fully human. We were part of nature, and nature could be taken to improve her. When I heard this seed patenting, I said, oh, so now you want to define the seed as empty. Bio-nullius. And it's what you do to seed that you claim creates the seed, because Monsanto, I have had to deal with about 10 cases on Monsanto. So all of what I'm saying has been argued in court. It was in the World Intellectual Property Organization. It is what was in the Intellectual Property Agreement of WTO, where Monsanto said we were the patient, diagnostician, and physician all in one. We wrote the treaty. But fortunately, in 87, I knew they wanted to do it. So I started to work with our ambassador in Geneva, and we got exemptions. And in India, we got laws passed, and I look forward to Anna's presentation on the seed law of Argentina. We got laws passed that seeds and plants and animals are not human inventions. They're not machines. Therefore, they cannot be owned through a patent. That's law in India, Article 3J of our patent law. And then I've been working with the farmers, from 84 onwards, but on the seed issue 87 onwards. So when our seed laws were being changed by pressure by the global industry, I said, but the first breeders are farmers. They've given us the 200,000 rice varieties. They've given us 1,500 mango varieties, 1,500 banana varieties. Farmers are the first breeders, and they have to have rights. So our law says Plant Variety Protection and Farmers' Rights Act. And I think every country should ensure two things. We stop patenting of seed, no patents on seed, and we start recognizing the contributions of farmers, because the entire industrial agriculture is based on biopiracy, taking what has been given. And they're very clever. They just draw a line. Yeah. Like they draw a line on the sand and say, okay, everything, this side of the line is not knowledge. But when we take what that knowledge produced, now we are the creators. And I often say with GMOs, for Monsanto, GMO means God move over. Yeah. You don't count. We are the creators. But they do the same in production. What is GDP? GDP only measures what leaves the home, what leaves the peasant economy, what leaves the women's economy, what leaves nature. It's an extractivist measure. And I call this the production boundary, which says it's defined in the UN system of accounting. If you produce what you consume, you don't produce. So the circular economy is defined as zero. But the circular economy is what has sustained seed, where the seed goes to seed and goes into seed forever, where the soil goes to soil fertility and gives us food forever. Circular economies and recycling are the true economies because they are the basis of life. The basis of profits and greed is extraction. And now, as I mentioned, they first began with soil and extracted from soil. Then they went to seed and started to extract from seed. And now they want to target our food. I talked about how they destroy our edible oils, but right now they are after all our food, real food. Just today, my government has passed a law, you can't eat ordinary rice. It has to be biofortified. But who's biofortifying it? Mr. Gates at Erie is doing the golden rice. 20 years, 21 years, they've been trying to increase vitamin A in rice. When the vitamin A is in our carrots, that's why it's called beta carotene. Vitamin A is in our pumpkins, in our mangoes. Vitamin A is in our turmeric. Those are 300, 400, 500 times richer in vitamin A. So here's a fake thing. And the vitamin A doesn't stay in genetically engineered rice. There's a very strong campaign. Say no to golden rice. And the second thing I have put up on the chat is reclaim our seed. Because this year, Bill Gates took control of all the seeds of the world, all the CGIAR centers, the IRRI, the CIMMYT, all the places where the peasant seeds were taken during the Green Revolution. And now they would like to use these seeds to make fake foods. So what is Mr. Gates' new agenda? I wrote Oneness versus 1% when I saw at the Paris summit on climate, Gates emerged as more powerful than the governments. And I said something shifted. So far, governments used to be the regulators, and they regulated the rich people. And now the rich people were regulating our governments and telling us how we should run our affairs. Since that time, Gates has gone into seed and food in a very big way. He is now the biggest farmland owner of America. He has created an idea. So, you know, every field in China used to be different. Every field in India is hopefully still different because we've been fighting to defend our small farms. Diversity is sustainability. Diversity is decentralization, and therefore diversity is democracy. So when you have only one agriculture all over the world with drones and surveillance and gene editing, and you know, and I know the presentation from Japan will talk about the resistance against gene-edited GMOs, so I won't take too much time talking about it. But all this was already in Bill Gates' head. And now he's tearing down the UN treaty. We wrote the Convention on Biological Diversity. He's tearing it down. We wrote an FAO seed treaty that you have to take permission of the farmers and the country before you take the seed. Now he's got the seeds in Svalbard. He controls the IRRI seed bank, and he can just do a genome mapping, you know, just a digital mapping, and say mine. So earlier, Monsanto used to steal and put a new gene to take a patent. Now, Gates has stolen and just does the genome mapping, digital genome mapping it's called, and he's said it very clearly. The international treaties are coming in our way, so we've got to get rid of them. So here is a man who would like to steal all our governments, steal our democracies, steal our seeds, steal our food, and steal international governance. And is doing this for genetically engineered seed and fake food. So he and Bayer and Monsanto have all joined hands to say, food will no more be food. You know, you can't go to your kitchen garden and pick up a carrot. You can't go and grow a lettuce. This is what they want. It's like in India today, mandatory fire fortification. What they want is to criminalize real food. They try to attack. India is the biggest dairy economy of the world. 100 million women make a living out of dairy. 1 cow, 2 cows, that's all. And they treat them like family members, just like my mother used to treat her cows as family members. And the calves were more privileged than we were. You know, they were her first children. And we were like stepchildren. We got the milk after the calves had had their whole fill. But Gates and all are paying for ads saying, if you drink milk, you've killed a calf. I've grown up with cows. And my mother gave them the first milk. We got the leftovers. So there's an attack on milk. There's an attack on fish. Yeah. Ocean-free fish from the labs. There's an attack on fake meat. Impossible burger made of GMO soya and fake blood made in the lab to look like meat and taste like meat. 14 patents. 14 patents. Now, on every fake ingredient of the lab, look at the money they'll make if they can prevent us from having our own fish, our own meat, our own milk, our own vegetables. This is what they're seeking. So like in 87, I took a pledge I will not let them patent the seed. I will defend the right of the seed and the right of our farmers, the right of farmers to save and share seed. And that's what we've done in NAVDANYA. We've created 150 community seed banks. And because we created the seed banks, we had seeds that could tolerate the floods, that could tolerate the cyclones. This is our seeds of hope, because these are seeds of resilience. They face the resilience of catastrophe. They're seeds of resistance. They say no to patenting, to genetic engineering, to corporate control, and they're seeds of regeneration, because they regenerate the soil, they regenerate the biodiversity, they regenerate our economies, they regenerate our humanity, they regenerate our communities, and they regenerate us being able to imagine a future where humans have not become an extinct species. That is why, for me, seeds of hope through resilience, resistance, and regeneration is the necessary act. And we have to say no to killing of the soil. We have to say no to genetic engineering of seed. And we have to say no to fake food. Let us join hands. It would be so good for all of us around the world to say, you cannot take real food away from us. And there's a double reason for this. Not only is food sovereignty our right, but food is the currency of life. You know, my research now over 37 years has shown me that what moves across species is nutrition. From the soil to the plants to our gut microbiome. That's health. But from the soil to the plants into the atmosphere and back again through the plants. That's the nitrogen and carbon cycle in a living system. Fossil fuels break that living system. But even the climate system is a nutrition cycle. Now, if food is the currency of life, then violating the integrity of food and making fake food is violating the rights of the earth, the rights of the soil, the rights of the seed. It is violating the rights of the small farmers to give us real food, which is why the Indian farmers' protests are so important. And finally, it is violating our rights. Descartes might have said, I'm a thinking thing without a body. But those thinking things like Bill Gates today and the Microsofts and the Googles are all wanting to control our bodies through fake food and make us sick. And a very important issue is the old poison makers, which I call the poison cartel, which grew in Hitler's land, became the seed controllers. They control about 60% of the seed. They have now joined hands with big tech, which became the billionaires, the robber barons of our age. Are the big tech, are the Facebooks, are the Googles, are the Microsofts, are the Apples. Now, they basically have entered into agriculture directly and into our food. And Silicon Valley is seeing huge profits if they could grab food. And they will try to make our local foods illegal, like they tried to make our local edible oils illegal. And I had to do a civil disobedience to bring our edible oils back. Today, we can buy mustard in the market because we said we will not obey. We will make our own oil. And we continue. And today, the corporations are also selling mustard oil. So the real struggle today, the real resistance today, is to defend Mother Earth and regenerate her, to defend the living seed and regenerate her through seed-saving community seed bank, and to defend real food and regenerate through food our health and our bodies. Amazingly challenging times, but the seed is in our hands, the food is in our hands, and they have an idea, a dystopia, that we'll take it all over. But if we stop them from taking over our seed, we can stop them from taking over our food. And the two great ecological civilizations, which are centered on food. I have a book right here with me, which has text after text on why you must respect food, why you must, it's your duty to grow good food, because in growing good food, you take care of the universe. The Chinese ecological civilization and the Indian ecological civilization have centered health on food, have centered the economy on food. They have centered community on sharing of food. This is the time for ecological civilizations like China and India and all indigenous cultures from Argentina to Mexico to Brazil, to every part, and say to these 5 billionaires and 4 toxic corporations, you can keep your billions. We will keep our seed. We will keep our food. Thank you.